What's up, everybody, and welcome back. Today we are covering how to beat Invoked Dogmatika. They just won the LCS 6. They're one of the top 5 decks of the format, and they have a lot of popularity out there in online tournaments, on Dueling Book, on yugioh Pro, things like that. So we're going to cover a few things such as siding, what to do against them, like how to stop them, what to hit with your hand traps, which hand traps are kind of effective, etc., like that. And we're also going to start out by talking about what does Invoked Dogmatika do. So obviously with Invoked, you have the one card engine. You know, you're playing 7 Alistairs. It's a 1 card Makaba because you just summon your Alistair, or you get to your Alistair, and then you go into your Almirage, into your Secure Gardener, and then Invocation to get your Makaba, and then banish your Invocation to get your Alistair right back to your hand anyway. So it's just a lot of free, it's just literally a free Makaba, and you can do it again next turn. And then the Dogmatika engine, you know, your Ecclesias, your Nadir Servants, your Fleurs, your Maximus, all this kind of stuff to plus off of if there's an extra deck monster on the field, which obviously you summon your Makaba, so there is an extra deck monster on the field, and then you can search out and get your things like your Dogmatika Punishment to pop a card on the field, and depending on what you send, you could possibly send like your Titaniclad and get a card in the end phase. You could send an Intis and you pop 2 cards. Like, there's just so much the deck can do. It can take advantage of cards such as 3 Tactics Talents, Ice Dragon's Prison is another card that can easily be ran in it, and you can actually send like El Shadal Apkalone and get to your Shadal Schism and make Winda on your opponent's turn on top of it. So it's like, it's not too hard to end on like a Makaba, get a Winda on their turn, your Ecclesia with like a punishment or a Fleur in your hand, and there's a good chance that you have a hand trap too, because the deck can very easily fit 12 hand traps with having absolutely no issues whatsoever. If you are interested in a deck list, we will have ours up on the channel very soon. It is done. We are just working on videos and have other stuff in line ahead of it, but that deck profile is coming to you guys along with our dinosaur. If you missed it, we did just drop a couple days ago our Dragon Link profile, where you can rip 3 cards from your opponent's hand, meaning that when they draw for turn, on their turn, they will only have 3 cards to break your board, which will consist of Arclight, Boarlord Savage with 5400 attack, and a Buster Lock. So that means no extra deck either. It's just really oppressive, and it's kind of fun to play. But without further ado, we kind of just, I guess, covered already what Invoked Dogmatika does between like the Makaba, Punishment, all the hand traps, Ice Dragon's Prison, popping your cards on your turn with like Intis, the Prison, things like that. They just plus a lot, and they're very good at resource management, and all the hand traps they can fit in. It's just really, really good. So how do you actually beat them? Well, there's a few things here that it's kind of tricky, because like they play Meltdown. Do you ash it? Do you ash the Meltdown? Because then if they open their in their Alistair, they like didn't need that whatsoever, and it seems like they always open both. But if you don't and you let it go through, okay, now they summon Alistair. Well, you ash the Alistair. What if they opened Invocation, you know? Which, I mean, they usually only play 2 Invocations, so the odds of opening Invocation aren't as good. So hitting Alistair is definitely better than hitting Meltdown, in my opinion. Just because there's so many ways to get to like the Alistair. Like, just negating the Alistair, the downside to that would be then they can just link it into Secure, or into Almirage, into Secure Gardener, and then continue off with their Dogmatika plays regardless. But personally, the way I see it is the Invoked engine is going to get them a Makaba at the end of it. That's all it's going to do. And I mean, not to downplay it, Makaba is pretty good, being able to banish a card, but usually they're only going to have a monster, maybe a random spell in their hand. So it's a monster negate, sometimes a spell, and it's just the one negate that you have to play through. So I actually would rather, I mean, here's the thing though, you can't necessarily just wait for the Ecclesia, because, you know, they'll have a Makaba on the field. But if you have 2 hand traps, absolutely wait for the Ecclesia, hit the Ecclesia, or I mean, I guess depending on your hand traps, if it's like a Nibiru, and then let the Makaba try to negate it, and then, you know, do your things that way. But if you have 2 hand traps, then you hit the Alistair and you hit the Ecclesia, because the Dogmatica part scares me way more than the invoked part does. I mean, if you open impermanence, I would actually save it for Ecclesia regardless, because there's a decent chance they won't have. I mean, I guess there's a decent chance they will open a trap, but not necessarily one that they're going to want to discard with their Macabre anyway. So it's kind of like a horse apiece. And if you do, use your your infinite impermanence on the Ecclesia and they happen to pitch one of their traps, if they open multiple or are just going to search out another copy, you're burning through their resources a little faster. You already got the negate gone then, and it's just one of those tricky matchups because like the Dogmatica engine, like between Nadir, Ecclesia, and if Nadir happens to send Titaniclad in the end phase, you're getting that too. Like, there's just so many one-card plays in this deck, and it's really easy because they play so many of them for that they could actually open. Like, if you negate the Ecclesia, what if they already opened their Fluor or their Punishment? Because usually playing 2 Fluor, 3 Punishment. It's just one of those things that's really kind of tricky. Nibiru, not very good at all because they make Macabre by the 4th summon. Droll and Lockbird, though, is just crazy because almost the entire deck searches or draws, like, adds cards. Like, Droll and Lockbird is hands down the best hand trap versus them. But otherwise, if I open Impermanence, a lot of the time I'll actually save it for my turn just because it's so ineffective trying to stop their board. So I would actually save the Impermanence for on my turn, and then, well, if they have Winda, you hit the Winda, depending how it plays out. A smart player, if you're me, not to say I'm a smart player, but not to say I'm not, so a little bit of rambling. Anyway, back on topic. A smart player will wait for you to like put a monster on board or special summon, put a monster on board, do something that to play around the impermanence, because then they'll get their wind on board, and you have a monster now, so you can't use the impermanence from your hand. Otherwise, they're probably not the greatest player if they're just shotgunning Winda as soon as possible, like chaining it to a spell activation that's going to go to the graveyard, because then you can just, impermanence it. And if they don't have a trap in their hand, their Macabre is not going to do any good negating it. Dark Ruler no more would be definitely good in this matchup as well, because, well, you just negate their field. They can't really respond to it. Forbidden Droplets, another really good card. If you happen to, say, use one of your impermanence and they happen to have a trap and they negate it with Macabre, Talents can be good. And then you just, if you didn't special summon yet, normal summon, and then if you have a generic link too, get rid of the Winda that way. So it's one of the decks where, unlike the Dragon Links and the Infernobles where they're going to rip apart your hand and you can't really use the board breaker cards, this is a matchup where the board breaker cards are actually better than the hand traps, unless your hand trap happens to be Droll and Lockbird. So let's go ahead. We're going to show you guys a combo and kind of just tell you what we mean about it. So here is a test hand that we just drew. It's actually the first test hand to the deck. It's just crazy consistent. So if they happen to go second, like look at that, Droll and Imperm, and they have a full combo in their hand anyway. But so they go first, and this is their opening hand. They play Meltdown. And actually in this case, it would have been really, really good if you hit the Meltdown. So I guess if you have just Ash in your hand and they play the Meltdown, it's not really effective depending what they open anyway. So just Ash the Meltdown, because then you stop the Invoker. This hand they could Nadir and send Titaniclad, add Ecclesia, normal it, and then get Punishment, and then get Fluor in the end phase, and they're still going to end with like a Droll Impermanence, Punishment with Fluor in hand. So as soon as you put an extra deck monster on board, they can summon Fluor and negate one of your face-up cards. So they're still going to do a lot, but Ash, at least you stop the Macabre from hitting the field. Obviously in this case, if you hit the Alistair, then it wouldn't have mattered because we did open our Invocation, which is kind of like what we said. There's just so much to the deck and how it works. It's hard to necessarily hit stuff. So I guess Ash the Meltdown. Don't Ash the Terraforming. Just let them get the Meltdown, and then Ash the Meltdown instead. Personal preference, at least, because then at least you're potentially stopping them. You hit the Terraforming, there's still 6 more copies of Alistair that they could have, as opposed to hitting the Meltdown. They only have the 3 Alistairs. And then, they're going to go off with here, Nadir Servant, and it really depends what they do. They can go for like the Maximus play and rip apart your extra deck, but depending on the format, that's only good when people aren't really planning for it, because there's so many cards out there that you can send then to plus off of them, like send your own Intis, send 2 of your own Intis's, pop 2 cards, things like that. Send Nova, get your own Makaba, send the Chimera Rafflesia and get your like fusion card to break their board, because Light Machine, Light Spellcaster, so super poly into a Mud Dragon, things like that. But here we're going to go for the Shadal play. So Nadir Servant sending the App Cologne to get the Schism, and then you have to discard, but you're going to need a Dark in the graveyard anyway, so we send our Alistair the Invoker. And then we go in Special Ecclesia. We get our punishment because on our opponent's turn then, I wanted to go with a Droll Imperm. Then you're going to get your Winda, your punishment. So then punishment will send a Titanic Lad on your opponent's turn, because you're going to get locked out of your extra deck and things like that anyway. And you're going to have Winda, so you'll only be able to special summon once per turn. But you'll send Titanic Lad, so in the end phase, you can special summon another Ecclesia, and then you can add Fleur to your hand. Then on your turn, special summon the Fleur, and you should have enough points for game. But that, I guess, is not showing you how to beat them. That is just telling you what they would do. So like we said, trying to stop the Dogmatika part is definitely priority number 1. The downside is they do put out the Makaba ahead of time, so it just makes it kind of hard. So I guess ashing the Meltdown, you saw Drone Lockbird is fantastic in the matchup. Drone, like, I'm personally maining it in almost every deck, and I really do like it a lot, this format. Otherwise, like I said, if you opened Impermanence, I would personally save it. Like I said, smart player would wait till you put a monster or a continuous card on board before going into the Winda. But at least if you save your Impermanence, you can just shotgun the Impermanence and hit the Makaba, and then at least the negate's gone. So in this case, you'd have 2 set cards. You're not really sure what's in their hand. I mean, here you're kind of SOL in a bad spot, because Winda, Makaba, punishment, Imperm, and Droll is definitely a really, really broken hand. So yeah, it's how to beat them. It's not necessarily easy, but like Dark Ruler No More would do absolute wonders. You're still gonna have the back row and possible hand traps to deal with. So like Lightning Storm would be another good one, especially if they don't have a spell to negate it with Makaba, and you can personally, like, if this was if they have Winda, you pretty much have to go after the monsters priority. But if it's just Makaba and a couple back row set, and you had like say Lightning Storm, I'd actually blow up the spell and traps and then just play through the 1 negate, because you should be able to play through a negate with your deck, if you're trying to play competitively at least. Like I said, there's a decent chance they're gonna have a hand trap too, so you're gonna have to kind of chip away. You don't have to win turn 1, especially if they do the Winda play like this and they lose the Alistair out of their hand. Otherwise, it does make it a little harder, because they're going to Alistair and then get Invocation again and go into another copy of Makaba to really apply the pressure on you. But you don't have to beat them in 1 turn. If you can take down, even a good chunk of their board, and then set it up to where you won't die and you can have a follow-up. Otherwise, like we said, ashing the Meltdown, we're going to just cover the hand traps real quick again. Ashing the Meltdown, save the Imperm for your turn. Drone Lock, really good. Nibiru, not good at all. Cyframe Gamma is actually, we didn't mention it, is really, really good, because if you use your Gamma, like they normal Alistair and you Gamma it, you negate it, you destroy it, it's off the field, there's no extra deck monsters, they can't go into the Dogmatika plays, they don't get the Invocation, and even if they open Invocation, Gamma and Driver summon to your field, so they can't use them out of your graveyard. Like, I've seen people say, oh, just Ogre the Alistair. No, don't Ogre the Alistair, because they're going to search their Invocation, and they're going to use your Ogre and their Alistair for Makaba. Like, that's just stupid. It's a complete waste and a hard nag on your part. So don't do that, guys. But yeah, so now let's go ahead and talk about side decking. I mean, we pretty much covered it already without actually talking about it, quote unquote. Side decking. What are you going to side deck against Invoked Dogmatika? Well, if you're not maining Droll Knockbird, you're going to side it against them, that is for sure. Lancia can hurt them a little bit. I mean, like if they have Alistair in the graveyard and they play Invocation and you chain Lancia, they can't banish the Alistair out of their graveyard, so either they have one in their hand and they are forced to use the one out of their hand as well, which kind of puts them at a neg and gets rid of a little bit of their follow-up because it goes to the graveyard, then out of their hand it wouldn't get banished, so they can't return the Invocation to the deck to add Alistair back to their hand as another follow-up play. But if they don't open the Alistair, they can't banish the one in the graveyard, meaning they can't get to their Makaba, so Lancia is another pretty decent option. Otherwise, you have things like we said, your Dark Ruler No More, your Forbidden Droplet, Pankratops, you can special summon into one special summon. Keeping in mind, if you're trying to beat over the Winda, don't forget if they have an Alistair in hand, they will boost it by 1000. So, otherwise though, Red Reboot is actually a decently good card against them. I know it's a one of, but I know I play actually, I mean, counting impermanence, I played 10 traps in my Invoked Dogmatika list. So, I mean, there's a lot of traps, and Red Reboot definitely hurts because I really try to prioritize the punishment in a lot of my matchups, because just popping cards and plussing in the end phase off those pops and things like that is really, really strong. So yeah, let us know what you would do against the matchup if you disagree with any of our things that we had mentioned. Otherwise, comment down below what you learned or how you liked the video. Take care, guys.